I'm another arm of Campaign in a Box. I think you've heard uh, kind of what our ethos is about. I can tell you my area of expertise within Campaign in a Box is in um, campaign communication. So you'll hear a little bit from me today, but a lot of what we'll talk about will be coming from our associate Joe and Resa, and Pete and Nicole. But yeah, we're happy to be here. The campaign in a box started with an idea because all everyone on our team were longtime electoral workers who have bounced from campaign to campaign, from coast to coast. Got a lot of knowledge on the job, a lot of institutional knowledge on how to run a campaign, and also how to learn from mistakes. And something that we really saw along the way is that new candidates um, uh, are often left out of the discussion when it comes to being considered top tier candidates, and a lot of that is because a lot of the times in our current political climate, if you don't immediately have a Rolodex that you can call and raise $100,000, $500,000, $1 million, you're not considered a viable candidate. And so, Campaign in a Box started on the idea that there is where we like to talk about the viability of ideas. There are plenty of candidates out there who know that they can represent their community, and they have a deep understanding of it. They know the systemic change that needs to happen, but it just becomes, okay, where do I make my first phone call to? How do I start raising money? How do I set up a website? How do I start getting supporters? And that tends to lend itself to going to consultants, and those consultants, quite frankly, won't pick up the phone for less than $6,000, $7,000 a month. Um, and so we need something different, and that was the genesis of Campaign in a Box. We believe in growing a democratic bench, a progressive bench in the country, and that starts at the state and local level. And so we wanted to take the experience that we had running these different type of campaigns and offering up that intellectual knowledge to folks so that they can kick off the campaign on the right foot. So that's a little bit about us. So you'll be hearing a lot more of what we have to offer along the way. But just wanted uh, to give you that, and I will let Joe. Do you want to say a few words? I know you'll be talking for a while, but do you want to say a little bit about your background?
Sure. Yeah. So I've worked in campaign finance my entire career since 2017. Just working as, a call time manager, deputy finance director, things like that. Working a lot with call time, more traditional fundraising. So the what you think of when you think of campaign fundraising, you're thinking of probably candidates making phone calls to rich donors. That's mostly my experience. Also with fundraising events, I worked for the Iowa Democratic Party for quite a few years, putting on large and small fundraising events. So have some experience there as well. But I'll get into the weeds on all that in my section. Um, I think up next we have Resa with her presentation.
Yes, we're back. Um, and by the way, we're so lucky to be working with all of you, Campaign in a Box team and Joe. Um, I think between all of us, there's a lot of campaign knowledge in this space. So we're really excited to share that with everyone here. And please use us as the resources that we work to continue being. To that end, we're going to start the actual workshops with campaign compliance. So I'm going to open up. Let me start the slideshow. And actually, I'm going to try to figure out really quickly how to do. Nope, it is going the wrong direction for me. Here we go. Let me escape it really quick so I can put it in presenter mode for myself. All right, can y'all see my notes on there, or do you just see the presentation?
Just the presentation.
Perfect. Yay. All right. So campaign compliance we'll start with the background. Campaign compliance is a really important part of running for office. And the reason that we're starting with campaign compliance is because we want people to understand that if you decide to run for office, it is a very serious commitment. Strictly just the running for office part. Getting into office is an even more serious commitment, but running is kind of your, foot in the door. And it is really important to stay on top of the compliance component because there are major legal ramifications. Now, the reason that all these rules exist is really because of Watergate. In the fallout of Watergate, reformers put forward Prop 9, and that the goal of it was to put an end to corruption in politics. As much as, we can still criticize, there have been a lot of reforms to involve or to incorporate transparency into campaign finance and political finance. Some of these include, lobbyists can't make political contributions. And, candidates are going to be, because of all the rules that exist, candidates are less likely to accept contributions from sources with whom they don't want to be identified. So some of these accountability rules include spending limits that were, unfortunately or fortunately, later ruled unconstitutional. So, the spending that you can do as a campaign is more or less unlimited. But other reforms that have stuck include lobbyist restrictions. Lobbyists also have to be registered, and they have to do the same kind of disclosures that candidates and politicians do. Conflict of interest laws as well. So you have to disclose conflicts of interest if you do get elected. There are bans on anonymous contributions over $100, and we'll get more into the weeds on that later. Extensive campaign disclosures, which we will also be discussing. Laws curtailing incumbent advantages through or at public expense. So basically, an incumbent can't send mailers through their job in the state. So I work for a state assembly member. There are rules that at a certain point in the year, we can no longer send mailers. The state will not send those mailers on our behalf, because that could be perceived as campaigning. So these rules try to curtail the incumbent advantage. So incumbents, if they want to keep their jobs, have to do their jobs, and they have to do them well. And then, of course, there's a centralized agency to ensure compliance with all these rules, and that's the California's Fair Political Practices Commission. That's at the state level. At the federal level, it's the Federal Elections Commission. And included in this deck are all the links to these sources, so we can, if you can refer back to those later. So, where do you start with all of this? It's really going to depend on what you're running for, because each different role, each different office is accountable to a different level. So if you're running for local office, let's say we're starting at the city level. If you're going to run for Victorville City Council, you are going to file with the Victorville City Clerk. They have their own procedures, but for the most part, they're going to be the same across the board as far as financial compliance is concerned. Because you're going to be doing certain filings in parallel. You're going to file them with both the city and the state. If you're running for a local office or a county office, so that is going to be your school boards. It's going to be potentially your water districts, assuming that they're limited to one county, or two, you'd be going with the one that is the county of your residence. And then basically the seats that are not unique to a particular city, those are going to be through your county registrar of voters. Same thing with county seats, like the county supervisor. And then for the state, if you're running for state assembly, the state senate, or state public offices like comptroller, treasurer, the lieutenant governor, the governor, you're running, or you are, I can do words, you're accountable to the Fair Political Practices Commission. However, locally, you're also, again, reporting to the FPPC. And then finally, if you're running for the US Senate or the House of Representatives, you are reporting to the Federal Elections Commission. Now, if I haven't made it clear yet, compliance is a big freaking deal. There are major implications, and they are personal implications. You are personally liable when you are running for office. So those can be fines, those can be legal actions up to jail time. This is a big deal. This is why this is the first thing we're talking about, because we need anybody who is running to understand the ramifications of choosing to run. So if you think you want to run, you have to establish your candidacy. And there are ways to do that, specifically around fundraising and your financial compliance. Because when we're talking about compliance, we are talking about specifically campaign finance. So in order to establish your PAC, you're going to want to think about how much you need to raise, because there are going to be different filings and slightly different rules. If you don't plan to raise more than $2,000, personally, I don't really recommend that unless you know you're running unopposed. And there's, no way that somebody's going to mount a write-in candidacy against your candidacy. I generally will not recommend, choosing that path, because there are lots of reasons for that. But in short, I generally will recommend being ready to raise money and put that money to good use with all the tools that are available to candidates. And in order to do so, in order to establish your candidacy, even if you don't choose to raise over $2,000, you still need to file your FPPC Form 501. It's your candidate intention statement. This is your way of signaling to the state that you intend to run for office and you intend to fundraise for that campaign. You have to file this before you start fundraising. You have to do this before you start fundraising. You cannot accept contributions before filing your 501. Don't even ask for pledges before you filed your 501. Don't play around fundraising before you filed your 501. Cover your butt with both hands and make sure you filed your 501 before you touch any kind of fundraising. So once you filed your 501, that means that you can start fundraising. Once you have started fundraising and once you have raised your first $2,000, then you have to file your Form 410. That is your statement of organization for a recipient committee. A recipient committee being a political action committee that intends to raise funds. There are different types of committees. This one is specific, like these ones, and there are different subtypes of committees under a recipient committee. You have your general purpose committees, and those are, maybe local political organizations, PACs, or just general political action committees, that care about a particular issue. There are candidate controlled committees. That is the kind that we're talking about today, is a candidate controlled committee, because those are funds that go to a candidate, you. So, some other things you might want to do that I recommend doing is file an EIN, or your, wow, why can't I remember what that employment or employer identification number. That is going to be with the federal government. In fact, you cannot file for those online over the weekend. It's only open 9 to 5 online. It's a fun fact. But the reason I recommend getting one of these is because it makes it easier to open a bank account. The other piece is you have to have a separate bank account for your political action committee for your candidacy. You do not want to intermingle funds between personal and campaign. The legal ramifications for that, again, are dire. It is, again, a personal liability that you don't want to take on. So do not skip the step of opening a bank account for your campaign, even if you do plan to raise less than $2,000. And then you have your Form 410, and that establishes your political action committee. There are rules around opening a political action committee, and the name of it. I believe you have to include your name, the office that you're running for, and the year that you are running. So mine was Barillas for School Board 2022. Those are the ways that you indicate, though, and establish that you are running. Now, and to clear up any confusion about political action committees, I know that there's a lot of a lot of people have a lot of feelings about super PACs, because they have very different contribution limits and expenditure limits. Political action committees are not necessarily super PACs. They are, it's just a blanket term for a committee that is registered to raise funds and spend funds for a political cause. And like we'd mentioned before, there are lots of rules around that, including regular reporting. So after you've established your PAC, you have to report regularly. There are 3 different types of forms, or 3 main different types of forms that you would have to file as a candidate. So the first is your Form 460. That is your recipient committee recipient committee campaign statement. These are filed periodically, and we'll go over that schedule later. Your Form 470 is, again, for those candidates who choose to raise less than $2,000. Then you have your Form 497, and this is strictly used during election cycles, and it is for when you receive a contribution that is over $1,000 in the 3 months prior to an election. So say one of your PAC donors comes through with a $3,000 donation because they believe in you so much, and they know that you're going to fight so hard for them that they want to give you $3,000. So as soon as you receive that, you have 24 hours to report that to the FPPC and whatever other campaign authority you have to report to. Now, we mentioned different filing authorities before. And again, just to reiterate, your state candidates are going to be through the Secretary of State / FPPC. That's kind of a tricky thing, or a confusing thing, because the FPPC is the authority. But really, when you send in the papers, you're sending them to the Secretary of State. Because FPPC is under the umbrella of the Secretary of State. The For county candidates, you're going to send most of all your filings to your county elections office. However, you are also going to be sending your forms 501, 410, and 496 or 497 to the Secretary of State. You're going to be doing the same thing for all the other offices as well. So all of your identifying the ones that establish you as a campaign, as well as the ones indicating that you received more than $1,000 from or more than $1,000 contribution. Those are going to also go to the Secretary of State. Now there are some seats that are a little interesting because they span across multiple counties. That wouldn't be under the umbrella of a state candidate, right? So, for example, Assemblymember Juan Carrillo and Assemblymember Tom Lackey, for the most part, that's going to be our assembly members for most of the people in this presentation. They represent two counties. They represent LA County and San Bernardino County. So they would be, if this was applicable, they would file with the county that of the highest population. However, since they are state candidates, they're just filing with the Secretary of State. For multi-county candidates, however, that are at the local level, not the state level, like a utility board or a water district that spans multiple counties, they are going to there's going to be kind of different rules for them on where they do their filing. When they register their 501s and their 410s, those are going to be with the county of domicile, where they live. And then for, other filings, it's going to be the county with the most registered voters. So it really is just going to depend. And there are links to that information as well. And y'all are all going to get a cheat sheet on this with all the links and all the information as well. And then finally, with the city candidates, you're going to have, that's your city council, your mayor, your city clerk. You're filing those with your city clerk. And your establishing documents are going to also be copied to the Secretary of State. There are also specific rules around who gets the paper copy with a wet signature and who gets a copy. Usually it's the Secretary of State who gets the original with a wet signature. But this is the quick and dirty. So I will make sure you get those resources as well, so you get the actual rundown of who gets which. You're going to be filing reports both in election years and off election years, as long as your PAC is open. And I generally recommend starting your fundraising before you're in your election cycle. So if you're running for a general election, for a November election, you should still be fundraising in the primary, because that's going to give you the tools to hit the ground running during the general. So in the non-election years, you are going to be filing twice. That's going to be in July. Your deadline is at the end of July for the January to June 3rd, first half of the year reporting period. And then you have until January 31st to file for the end of the previous year, the July to December filing period. And that's just for off years. During election years, it gets more complex. You're going to file that same 460 or 470 if you are not raising over 2,000 semi-annually, still the same dates as before, but you're going to add 2 more filings. You're going to add your pre-election filing. That's going to be September 26th. This is for this year's numbers, by the way. Those dates are subject to change depending on the year. So for this year, the pre-election filings are September 26th for July 1st through September 21st, and then October 24th for September through October 19th. So because the FPPC is aware that you're going to be raising a lot more during the campaign cycle, and as you get closer to election day, they want to see, more filings. And of course, you have your Form 497, which you are filing 24 hours or within 24 hours of receiving a contribution over $1,000. And that's this year is that period is August 7th through November 5th. So how are you going to file those reports? You are going to file them by paper, by mail, or you're going to file them online through NetFile. Fortunately, San Bernardino County makes NetFile available to its candidates, and that is by far, I think, the easiest way to do your filings, because it gives you the tools to enter your expenditures by contributor and enter your expenditures by by business, by whoever you've paid. So now we have to talk about the rules around compliance, and what information you're going to be reporting, because at the end of the day, that's really what we're trying to get at. That's what the FPPC wants to know. Who are you paying? Who is paying you? And how is it happening? So when you get campaign contributions, you need to collect some information from your contributors. Specifically, you need to get their legal name. You cannot have anonymous donors. You need to know their legal name, their employer, and their job, as well as their address. These are the things that you need to collect from your contributors in addition to the contribution itself. And then from entities, so if you're receiving funds from a PAC or from, someone else that is not an individual, you need to get the legal name of the business or PAC, as well as their address, and if applicable, their FPPC number. It is so important to understand that being able to identify a true donor is the key to your compliance, keeping you compliant. Let's put it that way. Failure to disclose the true source of a contribution is often referred to as campaign money laundering. That's a really big deal. You do not want to be engaged in campaign money laundering. Contributing through another person to conceal donor identity is also a violation. So you can't, you can't give somebody $100 and say like, hey, you know what? This is for this candidate. Can you just donate it to them for me? Because that is concealing the donor. If a committee received a contribution and the donor and intermediary were not properly identified, the contribution must be paid to the Secretary of State for deposit in the state general fund. So let's say you do receive an anonymous money order or cashier's check, and you don't know who that came from. You can't deposit it yourself. You have to put it somewhere because you don't know where to return it to. So you send it to the Secretary of State and it goes into the state general fund. There are campaign contribution limits, and they vary at different levels. Now, contribution limits to candidates apply to each election cycle. So that is for both the primary and the general. So if you're running for, I'll use assembly as an example again. If you are running for state assembly and you receive $5,500 from a donor who just loves you and loves your work and really believes in you, they can also contribute $5,500 to you during the general election. So they can spend $5,500 on you in the primary and $5,500 in the general. So they can, max out their limit to you at $1,100 for the whole year, for the calendar year. But it has to be done during the primary cycle and the general cycle. Now, political parties are different. Political parties can accept, like they have different rules around how much they can accept. But for state office and up, they don't have a limit on how much they can spend on a candidate. That is the prerogative of political parties, for better or for worse. They because it is in their interest to elect the candidates of their own party. That is what they exist for. So they get to spend as much as they want to. That is why campaigns also are why PACs and super PACs often work with parties and contribute to parties to ensure that certain certain candidates and certain parties agendas are moved forward. Now, again, some jurisdictions will set their own contribution limits. That's why the city and county has an asterisk. And there's a link to that where you can find if there are different local limits for your jurisdiction. As far as San Bernardino County is concerned, I do not believe that we do have different campaign spending or contribution limits, though. Now, there are prohibitions on who and how you can receive contributions. So again, anonymous contributions over $100 are a hard no. In fact, I don't recommend taking any anonymous contributions, because if a cumulative contribution is over $100, so say you have a donor who contributes to your campaign, say they give you $30 a month. After that 4th month, you have to report that person. And we'll get more into the details on that, but the long story short of that is you have to be able to keep track of your donors so that if they do reach that $100 threshold, you can correctly report it. You also cannot accept money orders, cashier's checks, or traveler's checks over $100 because it can't be linked to a specific individual. Contributions cannot be delivered in state office buildings. You cannot do political campaign work in state buildings. If it is state property, that is, that's violating that line between political and government, because there is a line between political and government. Campaign candidate and campaign spending cannot intermingle with public spending. These ne'er the two shall meet, right? State lobbyists cannot contribute to a candidate, including fundraisers hosted by lobbyists or lobbying firms. They cannot do that for you. The only way that they can do that is through independent expenditures that are not, worked with candidates. And even that is really tricky. And they have their own thing that I don't even think about or touch. So just don't take anything from lobbyists, because you can't. Foreign nationals cannot contribute to campaigns either. National banks and federally chartered corporations cannot contribute to campaigns. You cannot accept cryptocurrency as a campaign contribution. It's got to be, cash money, whether it's, but it's got to be hard money. You cannot solicit contributions from public employees. So technically, I don't think you can reach out to me and ask me personally for a campaign contribution because I'm a public employee. And you cannot accept cash over $100 because, again, it cannot be traced back. Just avoid cash in general. You're going to be able to accept contributions through card, through different payment processors. There are a lot of those. And you can accept contributions as checks. Now, more details on the cumulative contributions over $100. Contributions under $99 are reported as miscellaneous increases to cash. There's a line item specifically for, cash contributions under $100. But when an individual's cumulative contributions have exceeded $100, you have to report that they have done so with their full name, their job, their employer, and their address. And of course, you'll also need to disclose your in-kind contributions. Those are like material contributions. For example, let's say a union decides to send a mailer on your behalf. That is going to be an in-kind contribution. Or say someone contributes office equipment. For my campaign, my friend gave me a button maker. So that was an in-kind contribution, and I had to find the cash value for that item and report that. Now, as far as spending, I'm going to be sharing a woefully incomplete list with a lot of details omitted. And so this link here is going to be really important, the fppc.ca.gov link, which again is going to be in the doc that I give y'all at the end of all of this, is going to include all those details. But in short, campaign funds must be used for political, legislative, or governmental purposes. Now, here's the thing. You can spend PAC funds on like government kind of things, right? So the Assembly members PAC can it can pay for tacos for tacos and taxes event, because our state budget is pretty slim, but we want to do good things for the community, so we can use the PAC funds for that. Government or the state budget funds cannot do anything for the campaign though. So it's very similar to the way that a PAC can contribute to a 501c3. A 501c3 cannot contribute to a PAC. So campaign funds cannot be used for personal purposes, for auto care services, for clothing, for personal life insurance premiums, any of those kind of things that are for you, the individual. There are a lot of things you can spend campaign funds on. I recommend keeping it very limited to the kind of things that are specific to your campaign, like your mailers, your professional services, like hiring someone like Campaign in a Box, your communications, your digital ads, and of course, in support of your volunteers, ordering pizza for your canvassers when you go knock on doors, or having coffee for them before you head out and start knocking. Now you can also, some of the notables are also that you are able to lease property, so you can lease a campaign office. You can pay for childcare, but strictly if it is related to your campaign activity. So you can, hire a sitter for for a campaign event. If you want to be able to host a phone bank and you want parents to be able to turn out, you can hire childcare to make it easier for your volunteers. But there are restrictions, and we'll get into that as well. You can, reimburse and, do travel expenses as well. Mileage can be calculated. So if you have to, if you have to go down to the county registrar of voters, that is mileage. You can reimburse mileage on that. However, you can't, you can get a campaign vehicle, but it has to be in the campaign's name. And it's not like you can keep that. I don't recommend doing it because it is incredibly complex and you can get into a lot of trouble. So all that said, there are lots and lots of limits on how to use campaign funds, and I highly recommend restricting that to strictly campaign related activities. Now, there are some specifics on what you can't spend campaign funds on, of course, and that's going to be close. Like, yes, it is part of the professional image of you as a candidate, but they're yours. It's on your body. It belongs to you, and it's going to stay in your possession well after your campaign. You cannot use it for entertainment, for sporting events. You can't use it for personal gifts. even if that is, as thank yous to people. You cannot use it as salary or compensation for yourself as the candidate or for your family members. There are specific rules around that, but that's kind of the general rule. And those rules are generally also around if you are the person who can sign the check, you cannot cut a check to yourself. So you're there are rules around campaign accountants for that too. Or like if you have someone doing your finance on your team, they can't sign their own salary. However, there are some different rules for public, like for treasurers, if you hire or contract out a treasurer for those purposes. So all I said, you don't get to pay yourself or your family members a salary out of your campaign funds. You cannot purchase property. You can lease a campaign office. You cannot purchase property. And the campaign office lease can't be, your brother who owns an office center. You can't lease a property from him. Sorry. So your leases can't be paid to family members. You can't use it for personal health care. So you can't, buy yourself a gym membership, special dietary foods or medical checkups. And the childcare restrictions. You cannot pay for private school tuition with campaign funds. You cannot pay for your kids' medical expenses, or for tutoring services for your kids. Strictly campaign event related childcare. So questions, we're open for questions, but final recommendations are, personally, I would recommend, having done this myself, hire a treasurer. There are people, as you can see, campaign compliance law and accounting is a very specific field. It is a very specific skill set, and I highly, highly recommend hiring a professional to do it, because that is going to be really helpful in making sure that you stay in compliance and that you don't get yourself into trouble as a candidate. So if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to take those. And sorry, I did go quite a bit over time on this, but it is really important. I want y'all all to understand kind of the depth of implications here. So
that was amazing. That is a great amount of information. Are there any questions? Were there any questions in the chat? Or anyone have any questions about the information?
No, but as you said, great information. Thank you.
great, thanks.
Let's see, you said that you would be able to send a link for those slides so that we can have the information for the different applications and forms. Okay, so she has just put the link in the chat. So if you just take a moment to save that. I'm going to save it myself.
And that's kind of a cheat sheet. That's going to be all your links from the FPPC. And granted, I spoke largely on the state and local level.
Okay.
So just keep that in mind. For federal, it's going to be different. If you are running for federal office, the implications are going to be huge. Don't do it yourself. Just hire a treasurer. Like, forget everything I've said. Hire a treasurer. Let them do it all if you're doing federal. Bottom line.
And we had one question in the chat. It was a question on loans to other PACs. How does that get coordinated?
That's a great question. You are able to offer a loan to another PAC. You set the terms yourselves. It is complex. I would consult with a campaign finance a treasurer or a campaign finance attorney and or the FPPC, because you do need to consult with the FPPC on those things ahead of time. The FPPC does have a helpline, but as you get further and further into things, you can establish a relationship with different different people within the FPPC. Also, if you ever run into issues with the FPPC, you can consult with your state legislative office. So that would be your state assembly office or state senator. We are able to liaise with state agencies on your behalf if there are ever any issues. However, I will say that FPPC is very responsive because at the end of the day, they just want people to be in compliance. They don't want to see people going to prison. They just want transparency and they want to enforce transparency. So sorry, that is a very vague answer, but consult with the FPPC on it because it gets complex.
I can imagine.
Can I just double down on something real quick? This is Pete. Resa, that was outstanding. I mean, and it shows you how complex they have made this for a lot of folks. And like you pointed out historically for good reasons. One thing I want to really double down on, as someone who's been a political operative for 30 years and as someone who ran for Congress themselves, I would actually, when we actually sign on with people or when we're giving them advice, we actually say the first thing you should do, the very first thing you should do, spend the money before you even bring on a manager. Get yourself a compliance firm that can handle all of this stuff for you, that will answer your question. All those things can be questions. Think about everything that Resa just went through. And you're out there trying to run for office and can I do that? Get yourself a firm that will answer those questions as they pop up, that will handle all of that reporting, because that's what those firms do. And if your campaign gets big enough, these firms will also act as your the paychecks. The people, they'll be the ones who pay the pay and pay the bills too, and do all of that. Now, that could be scary because think of how much amazing information we just got. Obviously, someone that has that much information might cost a lot of money to bring on to do it. There are a lot of great firms out there that actually do it on a sliding scale, and they actually charge you by what you raise. And so they kind of have the same concept we do, and they're out there, and you can find them, and some of them are actually that we work with are in California. So again, I just want to double down on it because there was so much great information, but I really want to double down as someone who's been through it, as I say, on both sides of the table. If you're going to run the type of campaign where there is going to be money coming in and money going out, I really recommend highly make that first person you bring on either that treasurer or, in the perfect world, that finance compliance team that knows all of these answers of all of this information we just got.
No, I completely agree with that. Like if you hire no one else on your campaign, hire someone for your compliance, a treasurer, a compliance officer. But that is the most complex area. And the laws change too.
That's a great point. They change in the middle of I know that when I was running, they change in the middle of the campaign sometimes. And again, having that go-to person there, it was never even a road bump because that's what they do. And then they just told us and we just moved on. So that's a great point.
Yeah. Roger, I saw you unmuted. Y'all are, it is actually, we're way over time, but did you have anything else that you wanted to add?
No, Pete jumped into with exactly what I was going to say. I was exactly that. I mean, it's an entire reason why, we as a consulting firm don't offer compliance because it is it's an industry in itself.
It is.
And hugely important. So that's all I was going to add.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for sticking with me through it. Next, we're going to go into fundraising. So, Joe, I'm handing it over to you.
Great, thank you. Yes. Next, we want to find out how to put those compliance people to work. Can everybody see my screen? We good? Perfect. All right, so fundraising 101. First, a lot of candidates I talk to, some of them don't necessarily think that they need to raise money, but as Resa pointed out, unless you're running unopposed, you need to raise something. And so why make phone calls when you can just send out emails or things like that? Some really important points on like traditional campaign fundraising. First of all, it's extremely effective. Getting that personal conversation between the candidate and a donor is of the utmost importance. It helps turn small dollar donors into slightly larger dollar donors, and it turns like people who give $200 at a time into $500 givers, because the candidate is spending that time. There's also the potential to talk to donors about things that are more than just a donation. You can make a personal connection with them. They may have some information for you that if they just sent it to your campaign email, maybe it gets lost somewhere. But if you have that phone conversation, you're more likely to remember it. And you're more likely to bring it to the attention of, if you have staff, the staff, or your team, if they're volunteers, about fundraising events, organizing events, things like that, things happening in the community as well. Sometimes donor conversations can tip you off to something that maybe you hadn't heard about in the news that you need to speak to as your campaign. And like I said, your time as a candidate is valuable, and prospective donors definitely understand that. If they're getting a personal phone call from a candidate, that's a big deal to most good donors. And it's important to show them that you care about their time and your own, and you're willing to spend it on them. So who should you call? That is obviously the next question. If I'm going to make phone calls for money, who should I call? Like Roger spoke about in the beginning of this, a lot of the candidates we've worked with at Campaign in a Box don't necessarily have a giant, address book full of a ton of very, very wealthy people, like some connected candidates do. But you still have personal connections with people that you can leverage, especially as your campaign starts out. It's a great way to get some buy-in and get some campaign dollars in the door, in order to hire that, campaign finance consultant, or your treasurer, and then maybe a campaign manager as well. This can, be family, friends, coworkers, former and current, any acquaintances. I always tell the story. I worked for someone running for governor, and they, through their travels as a lawyer and with the National Guard, had collected a whole box full of 1,000+ business cards. When you collect those things, that's valuable contact information that you can leverage for your campaign. You can also find rich donors in your area, lawyers, doctors, business owners. Something that you can do as a candidate is you can look at what sorts of people give to political campaigns in your area. You can't take names directly from another candidate's list. But if I do this for candidates on Campaign in the Box, I look at who's ran in that district before, and I just look at just the employer and occupation labels on the FEC website. If there's a lot of lawyers, that's an area to explore in your district. If it's a lot of doctors, that's an area. Maybe there's a big business in your city that employs quite a few people that are like-minded and looking for change. You can look into that as well. You should also call supporters. As you're building your candidacy, you're going to, be filing petitions to get on the ballot line. You're going to be collecting names of supporters. These people you can also look up their campaign contribution history, and I'll get into that in just a minute. But this is a very basic starting point. After that, maybe you start looking at philanthropic organizations that have donors, whether that be like a local museum or your local playhouse or something like that. Those people are philanthropic, and you can look up their contribution history as well. What you really need is just a large list of names, and then you can go into the next step, which is turning them into true donor prospects. One of the ways that we decide how much to ask for is this donor prospecting process. You can find their contribution history on fec.gov for federal candidates. In the state of California, they have a state lookup tool as well. The FEC makes it extremely easy to look up previous contributions from specific individuals. And this can tell you a lot about their donor potential, how they like to give, and who they give to, which is also very important. Not only for telling you whether they'll give to you specifically, because obviously if you're running in a particular political party and the person you're looking at is giving to the other political party, they're less likely to give. Although I would say if they're in your personal network and you know them really well, don't hesitate to still call them up. I've had many candidates I've worked for have gotten contributions across party lines because of close personal relationships, and that's important to leverage there as well. But it can tell you, if they give to a certain cause or a certain candidate who focuses on a certain issue, that can tell you what to talk to them about when you do get them on the phone too. I always give the example, if they give a lot to the Sierra Club, you find that in the state of California lookup tool, their local Sierra Club, you're going to want to talk about environmental issues, where you stand on those issues with them. That's just an example. You can find many ways you can find many things about a person through how they give and who they give to. And that can help you in your conversations. And so then you'll kind of set it there. So if somebody likes to give, $500 at a time to candidates, that's what you should ask for. If they give, smaller dollar, they give like recurring monthly contributions to candidates, which is very popular because of services like ActBlue and things similar to that. You may want to ask for that recurring contribution, which is also very helpful because that adds up. But you want to ask for those similar contributions, because what I've found in my experience is that donors like to give the way they've given before. Maybe they've had, a change in circumstances, but that's extremely rare. So you should stick to your gut instinct on what they've given before. Next, what does calling look like? So call time is what we call it in campaign fundraising and campaign finance. This is essentially when the candidate or a principal of the campaign is making phone calls to those donor prospects. They should have asks next to their name. And this time should really be set aside on your calendar because call time can feel a little bit like a long, slow, boring process. You're going to hear a lot of phone ringing. You're going to leave a lot of messages for potential donors. A lot of people don't answer the phone on the first call anymore because they like to screen their calls because of, I'm sure we've all gotten your car's extended warranty call once or twice from a scam caller. So if they don't have your number in their phone, they're going to want to screen that call. That's why I always tell candidates as well to make sure to leave a message to let them know you're a real human being. Once you have this time set aside, though, on your calendar, you're more likely to do it. If you are a campaign with staff, you should try to dedicate a staff person to that time to help hold you both accountable, to hold your feet to the fire on getting in that room and really focusing on this. This is a volume game. It's really not, something you can just pick up and put down whenever you feel like it, because a lot of times you're not going to feel like it. And you're going to need to sit down and really commit to it. And along with that, you're going to want to commit to that ask number. If you've done the research or your staff has done the research on these potential donors and they think that they can give $500, unless that conversation, they literally say, I don't have any money anymore for whatever reason, you should still ask for that $500. They can sound a little wishy-washy, but you'd be surprised. I've definitely been in the call time room with people who it sounded like they weren't going to give it all, and then the candidate just made the ask anyway, and they said, yeah, I can do that right now. And it was a complete surprise to both myself and the candidate, but that's why you ask for that amount. Also on this, having an organizational system in place prior to you starting to call and thinking about that intentionally is extremely important. I always recommend for federal candidates that they get a database. Like I said before, it's a volume game. You're going to be dealing with a lot of potential donor prospects. Keeping hundreds of people organized in a list is extremely difficult. Without using some sort of organizational system. You're going to want to make sure that you don't call people twice in a row or within a couple days of each other. My general rule of thumb is 2 weeks before you call again, unless they call you back, and then you can call them back immediately. You wait 2 weeks. If you do end up mistakenly making that second call within that 14-day period, you might need to look at your organizational system. You also don't want to talk. You also don't want to pester people too often. That's why I have that 14-day window there that you need to wait until you're calling again. In an ideal world, you have this database. You have a coding system. A lot of the databases that you'll see available for candidates are just ways of organizing essentially like a voter file. That can be helpful. I've had a lot of experience with the NGP platform, which you can look into. There's some other platforms as well, but they have functionality where you can tag people with certain things so that like they are currently on my like call list, and I use like in circulation, but you can use whatever comes to mind for that tag. Or if somebody says, hey, call me in 3 months, I'll be able to give then. You want a date-based code so that way you don't forget about that person. That's also why an organizational system is extremely important, because when you're dealing with hundreds of people and you lose a donor in that giant list, it's going to be really hard to dig them up again. So making sure that everyone's always like tagged with something, whether it's somebody that you're going to call in a couple weeks, or somebody that you can use like even a code like terrible call or bad call to like get those people off your list, because those people you definitely don't want to call again, because they can get very angry and it can be a very uncomfortable conversation. And then once you have that organizational system, however that works for you, setting that up, getting that all set, you can sit down and start calling. You're going to want a quiet and comfortable room. Like I said, blocked off time on your calendar, and that should be available to your staff as well so that they know not to disturb you, because there's going to be things that come up on a campaign that always kind of feel like an emergency that you need the candidate's opinion on. Unless it's like a true emergency, staff should not be interacting with the candidate during call time, because as a candidate, you're going to want to get out of that call time room by any means necessary, because it's all going to feel more important and more fun too. Like I said before, leave messages, make sure people know that you're a real human being. And importantly, and this is something that a lot of people, when they're running for office, what to talk about on the phone with these potential donors can be a little bit of a sticky point. You can certainly talk about the issues, why you're running. That's definitely on there. But really, a lot of your time with a lot of these donors, especially in your personal network or the larger donors, are going to want to know what this money is going towards. So you need to talk about what your campaign is doing, what's coming up, what you have already done. How many signatures do you have? What kind of, what are you doing to reach out to potential voters? Those sorts of things are what donors are really interested in hearing. I always tell this story. When I was working for the Iowa Democratic Party in the 2018 general election, we had a problem where our field offices were running low on all kinds of office supplies, pens, pencils, clipboards, literature to carry out to the doors for volunteers, those sorts of things. But we came up with a really funny like email outreach that was, help us buy toilet paper for our field offices. And it's kind of a funny like way to like grab someone's attention, but that was an item on the list of things that we needed for our field offices. So if it has some grounding in truth and donors can feel like they're connected to the campaign in a way, they're much more likely to give than if you're just talking about what you will do once you're elected. Talk about what you're doing now as a candidate. And then hopefully they say yes to that ask. Like I said, don't forget that ask and stick to it. Hopefully they say yes. Something I tell every single candidate is do your best to get that contribution over the phone. Whatever, if you're using like ActBlue or PayPal, however you're processing those contributions, the easiest way is for that staffer that's hopefully sitting across from you and holding you accountable to take the phone from you. You say, hey, I'm passing this off to Joe. He's going to take your information. It was so nice to talk to you. And Joe, your staffer, takes that information and puts it into your payment portal to get that contribution right then and there. Anything that you don't get right then and there should be tagged as a pledge and put on a list. And you should have a list of pledges that you routinely follow up with. You should check these every 2 weeks. More often, if you you should be calling them every 2 weeks. You should be checking it every day to see where all your pledges are at and whether things have come in. Even if it's as simple as somebody saying, "Yeah, I'll just do it right now. Just send me the link. Like text me the link," and you text them the link. That still gets marked as a pledge, and you don't take it off your pledge list until you have that contribution. That's another part of this organizational system that is of the utmost importance. Setting up, a spreadsheet that is separate from your database with a list of pledges is super, super important to make sure that you are checking on them regularly and that you have their information readily accessible. Another note on this is that as you're leaving messages and things like that, maybe outside of call time, you get a call back. You should be willing, and if you're able, to take that call right then and there and make the ask over the phone. So however you're organizing your call time, whether that be, a spreadsheet that's in front of you, or traditionally a lot of people print off separate call sheets for each potential contact. Those should be readily accessible for you so that you can go back really quickly and say, okay, I called these numbers today. How much was the ask for? You can also reach out to folks after leaving a message. You can have a staffer send them emails to say, hey, my candidate reached out to you today. Is there a time that works better for you to make, a connection to talk about the campaign? Just having them send out like a bunch of those emails to all the left message people, all the people you left messages for, can be really helpful too in scheduling calls. Scheduling calls is also part of this. Hopefully you have some staff or a volunteer is willing to help you do that, but blocking off some time on your calendar for individual donors is also a good practice to have in your wheelhouse. Another piece that I wanted to talk about is fundraisers. It's something that I have extensive experience with. This is also why you want to call. Some people are going to want to host fundraising events. If you get a wealthy donor on the phone, they're going to have wealthy friends most likely, and you're going to want them to host a fundraising event for you. These traditionally have, invites that you send out, and then maybe a poster or some way of recognizing people who help support the fundraising event at the event. It used to be that you had to have like your hosts and your supporters and all these different levels of contribution. You had to have a lot of them before you could like send out the invite because you'd put their names on the invite. Now it's kind of switched to where you just have like a big poster that you print off at FedEx and you put up at the door of the event to recognize them there, and the invites are all electronic, and it's a lot easier that way. But you should treat these like organizing events that have a donation component. That means that you need to double confirm that everyone is actually coming, because there's nothing worse than showing up to a fundraising event that only has 3 or 4 people. You're going to want to make sure that anyone who is, volunteering to host, one of these donors who says, hey, I want to throw a house party for you. Well, you need to make sure that your staff is on top of that person to make sure that they're actually reaching out to people. I've had many fundraising events that I either had like some knowledge of, or was like part of a team that like someone else was supposed to handle it. And if it's not handled correctly, it can really be a bummer of an event. And you really don't want that. So make sure that you're staying on top of your team, and making sure that they're getting a good amount of people there. And these can take a lot of forms, traditional meet and greets, things at like local bars, restaurants, cafes, coffee houses. I've seen those all the time. Some people have board game nights where they invite people, and it's like more of a relaxed atmosphere. You can have like live music if you have some musically talented friends who are willing to perform for free at a fundraising event, things like that. But you need to think creatively about this, but also you don't have to put yourself under too much pressure to come up with the best new idea for a fundraising event. People kind of know what these are, and you can do like a traditional meet and greet where you're meeting some potential supporters. A note I always make sure to tell people is to have a suggested donation at the door, have a section of the fundraiser where it's called pass the hat. Someone is either the candidate or usually someone from the staff, like your finance director, will give a speech about how important this money is while you pass a hat around the room and people put cash in it. That's a very common thing to do at fundraisers, and people throw 15 or 20 bucks in there for you. The other piece of fundraising events, excuse me, is that when you're going to any organizing event, or even an event not hosted by you, but you as the candidate have been invited to, you should always, always, always have little contribution envelopes with you. Those should be present, obviously, at all your fundraising events, but when you go to a union hall, or some outside organization has invited you to speak, part of your speech should be to pitch how important supporting the campaign is, and you should have a way for them to donate right then and there. And that's a good way to collect potential supporters as well. Something that I forgot to mention earlier, but that Resa mentioned with the $100 anonymous contribution and why that's a bad thing for compliance. This is also why it's a bad thing for fundraising. Anonymous donors, you cannot call again. But when you're collecting these donors at various events, if you get their information on that envelope, you can call them again and hit them up for more money. And I traditionally have candidates call every quarter all their good donors to ask them to contribute again that quarter. That's something that's extremely important as well as a candidate. You can always go back to the well with some people, and that's also why it's important to connect with them about what's happening in your campaign. And then that brings my piece to an end. Sorry.
Hey, I just want to, again, double down on one thing. Everything, again, was laid out perfectly. I do want to go back to something Joe said at the very beginning. He was 100% correct, but there's a nuance that could help a campaign that I want to make sure folks get, especially, new people, because it's not as second nature. He's absolutely right. You can't use a list that you get you can't use another candidate's list that you access to call their donors. However, candidates or entities, if it's their list, they're the owner of that list. They're allowed to give you their list or sell you their list, or each place is a little different. If we're talking federally, they can give you their list, and then up to a certain point, it's an in-kind contribution, and they are allowed to do that. So if you actually get a list from someone who owns it, you are allowed to use it, and it becomes like any other donation. Either you paid, well, it's not even a donation. Sometimes it's a service that you could have bought, the list. That becomes absolutely allowed to be used. The other thing I will say, in full disclosure, when Joe was telling the story about being utterly shocked when the candidate actually closed the deal, that was because Joe was sitting across from me for 8 hours a day, and it was pretty much every time I closed the deal, he had that look of incredibly happy shock on his face. So I will say that. But Other than that, I just wanted to be really specific about the list thing. If you do it in the right order, you can use other folks' list, but it has to be either uh, uh, provided to you by them or sold to you by them.
That makes sense. The I also have we also have built in here, and we don't have to spend too much time, but obviously on the call, we have Pete and Resa who have been on the other side of the table in call time making those calls. And so just wanted to build in a little time if you have any helpful advice in talking it from the candidate's perspective.
Yeah. On the serious note, get it, and I mean this seriously with Joe. Get a good person to be that second person in the room. It is difficult. It gets hard. For me, it was counterintuitive. You would think that when Joe gives that list of call your friends, call your coworkers, call the people that have worked on causes with you as one of your first calls, you would think those would be the easiest calls to make. I actually personally found it easier to call the list of 25 people who I might not have known, but we shared a common a cause at some point. Everyone's a little different. But sometimes it's just harder to call the folks and you're asking your cousins and your friends and your family for money. But everyone's different that way. But I want to bring that up. That was for me the toughest. I found once I got into it, I think Joe made this point, and Resa, I'd love to hear your how it was for you.
Yeah.
It was like if you were going to do a 3-mile run or a jog. It's like once you took the first block, you were going to get it done. It was just motivating yourself to get up, do the stretching, and start the darn thing. So once I got into the call room, whatever the shift was, I felt I got into it and I was going to get it done. It was like Joe mentioned, though, there was always some excuse before I got there to try to tell myself I really needed to do something else. So I'll leave it at that and let Resa weigh in too.
No, I agree. Once you have the momentum, that's, it's easier to keep going. Because momentum is the hardest thing to build. It is just like going to the gym. It's so much easier to like just work out while you're there. Even if your plan is just, I'm just going to hop on the treadmill for 10 minutes and then I can, go sit in the sauna and chill, right? But then once you're into it and it starts to feel good and then you're comfortable. But it is hard to get comfortable with the idea of asking people for money. I think that was the biggest roadblock for me. Because, the idea of asking somebody for money, is humbling. And so you have to create that mental compartmentalization that you're not asking for people to bankroll your lifestyle. You're not asking for a handout. You're not asking for charity. You are asking people to contribute to change. You are asking people to support a change in the community that you want to bring. So you have to approach it with that mentality of, this isn't for me. This is for the cause. This is for something bigger than each of us. That's what helped me get over that hurdle. But for me, my love money list was actually the easiest for me because they were the same people who had been encouraging me to run anyway. I happened to be working for an environmental nonprofit that some of y'all probably know. And so my coworkers were my best fundraising base. Because they were all in on it. They were part of the, training programs that I did. So those were, some of the easiest asks for me because they were already ready to go. And I started the conversations with that kind of stilted, because they were some of my first asks. It was still kind of that stilted, getting comfortable with a script kind of script. And they were like, what? Oh, okay, I know what you're doing. Yeah. Yes. Like I'll give, like, one of them I asked for 250. And he's like, ask people for more. I'm giving you 500. Because they knew the game. So talk to the people who know the game. If you have those people in your life, if you are fortunate enough. But I think one of the most important things too was connecting those dots of for the people that I was asking, making that connection of, I know that you care about this, and this is something that's really important to me too, and this is something that I would like to work on. And in my campaign, I tried to use a lot of we language. This is something that we as a community really need to work on. We are experiencing this. So, if you can help us solve this problem with a contribution of X, Y, and Z, or can we count on you for this contribution of X, Y, and Z? Because using that we language, it's not me asking anymore. That is us. That is also bringing them into it. They're in on it. I think that helped me get over that hurdle as well. But I think one of the most important things that I learned, and one of the most important tools in your tool belt, is silence. Make the specific ask number. Ask maybe a little bit more than you think they can give. And be quiet. Shut up. Just don't talk. Let them do the talking. Let them say, I can't do that right now, but I can do this much. I can't do $500, but I can do 125 for the rest of the election cycle per month. Let them talk. In fact, sometimes they'll talk themselves up to a higher amount. Sometimes they'll say, I can't do 500 right now, but I can do 250. That you're up 250 from when you started the call. So use silence, use a specific ask number. And then, express gratitude, even if they can't, even if they say, I can't contribute right now. No worries. I totally understand. Times are what they are. And I appreciate knowing though that I have your support. Another thing that was important for me was also, getting connected with other people, getting a recommendation list of people who other people knew. And so my introductory kind of script on that was, Mike suggested I call you because he said you really care about, about trans students' rights. And I've made that issue a central part of my campaign. When I'm in office, I plan to do X, Y, and Z on this issue. And we know that in this community, we are at risk of X, Y, and Z. So I would love your support as we combat this in this community and make sure that our children have, their full rights and safety. So can I count on your contribution of? It can feel a little schmoozy because you are making a specific call to somebody to ask them for something. You're going to introduce yourself. You're going to say, hey, it's me. It was so great to see you at the last chamber breakfast. So you want to establish and reinforce your connection with them right off the bat, because these are relationship calls. So if you don't already have that connection with them, you are creating that connection. You're establishing that connection by letting them know how you're connected, like if you have that shared cause, like Pete had said. So, because my general script is like, introduce yourself, establish or reinforce that connection, demonstrate, it was so good to see you at this other thing, especially if that is related to one of your platform planks. Give them a reason that they should be contributing to your campaign. Again, reinforcing that connection and demonstrating that you understand that this is something they care about. So they should also care about your candidacy. And then make your specific ask number and stop talking again. Use that silence and then thank them, follow up. I used my cell phone, so I would just text people the Act Blue link afterwards, or I could text them the address if they'd prefer to send a check. So Um, those are, those are my general takeaways and like what helped me with the call time fundraising. Because I think that was kind of the hardest part. It's easy to send an email if you can craft language that is compelling, especially your subject line has got to be the most important piece of all of it. Because getting somebody to open an email, especially during a campaign cycle, is hard. But even still, like emails are nothing compared to getting on the phone with somebody, hearing their voice, and asking them for money. So, thanks, Joe. The information was incredible. That's what I've got.
We did have a question in the chat.
Yeah.
Let's see. Maria had asked, do you report the fundraising event for the host?
Do you
I
report?
believe you do.
Okay.
As like an
It's a
in-kind.
compliance question then? Yeah.
Yeah.
I was a little confused there.
Yeah.
Oh, but something I did want to mention that you brought up with the difficulty with getting on the phone, getting off the phone as well can be difficult sometimes too. Having a trick for that as a candidate is really, really important because some people are going to want to talk to you for an hour. And as a candidate, you're like I started, your time is valuable. 15-minute call, I'm totally fine with that as a call time manager. A 30-minute call, I'm not as okay with that unless they're contributing the like maximum, you know? So just having some thoughts in your head, especially when it starts to run a little long, of like, hey, I got to get to this thing or I'll give you a call back later. Not being afraid to move on. That's another piece. But I'll turn it over. I think we had, if there's no more questions on this, I think we had Nicole up next.
Perfect. Let me see if I can manage just to share my screen. Okay. Can you all see this?
Yes.
Perfect. So I'm going to give a very brief overview of peer-to-peer text fundraising. This is something that we have seen a lot of success with this cycle. It's not necessarily a new idea, like I think Pete said earlier, but I think there's definitely some untapped potential in the fundraising field for it. So first is, what is peer-to-peer or person-to-person texting? This defines texting as requiring a human being to manually click or press somewhere in order for each individual text to send. So this can be from your personal phone where you are physically hitting send, or it can be from a peer-to-peer texting software where you're just clicking a button over and over. It's auto-populating that message in and you're just hitting send. The other form of texting that exists is broadcast texting, which is sent out all at once automatically by a machine. You just click the button once and it goes out to thousands of folks. And that requires an opt-in. So that requires somebody signing up on your website or being a previous donor and checking the box, saying, yes, please contact me about the campaign, signing up at an event in person. Peer-to-peer texting does not require that opt-in. And this allows campaigns to be texting folks who may have never heard of the campaign as long as we have their phone number. So one of my favorite things, this was like a meme on Twitter, but these roommates were sending each other texts in the format of a peer-to-peer text message to remind each other to do chores. And I actually think it's a very good example of the style of text that we go for, where it's casual, it's conversational, it's like you're being texted by your roommate, being told to take out the trash, except you're being told to donate. So I did include that because it always makes me laugh. So Resa gave us a great primer on this one. The most important thing is remaining compliant. Not doing so can risk being filtered by cell phone carriers like AT&T and Verizon, being removed from your peer-to-peer texting platform, and angering your voting base and potential donors. So first and foremost, registering with a service like Campaign Verify is very strongly suggested by all of the peer-to-peer software providers. This will whitelist you with the different cell carriers so that that number that you get from Campaign Verify is, when it goes through and people are getting those text messages, AT&T will let it through, T-Mobile will let it through. Opt-out messaging is also very crucial. Adding something at the bottom of your text, like reply stop to opt out, stop to end, stop to quit, anything that gives people that out should be at the bottom of every single text message, even if you're sending it to your list of opt-ins, your supporters, your volunteers, your existing donors. And often a lot of those softwares will flag if you do not have that opt-out language. And a lot of them also automate it. So if people do respond with the word stop, they'll just take it right out. And be sure to sync those records of who has opted out across all your databases and CRMs periodically. So if you're using one software for your broadcast messages and one software for your peer-to-peer messages, make sure that you're downloading that opt-out list and uploading it into the other one, just so that folks aren't getting some texts and not others when they've tried to opt out. Because like I said, it makes people angry. There's no way around saying that. It is really annoying. And of course, do not send excessive text messages. So it's the same thing like with calling and emailing and any other form of fundraising. If you receive a text 7 days in a row from a campaign, the last thing you want to do is donate to them. If you even let it get to 7 days, I see a lot of folks opt out after 2 or 3 days of repeated text messaging. So make sure that you're rotating through those lists. Thankfully, with text lists, the cooldown period is quite short. Just give them a week, just let it be. And then you can go and you can touch those folks again. So I did include this headline as well. A man in Illinois received a lot of fundraising texts from the Pelosi campaign. He was on the do not call registry, which does not apply to political messaging. But people do get upset when they just receive these constant outreaches. So how much does it cost? All fundraising does cost an amount of money. So Campaign Verify is $95. The phone numbers and the donor data from a vendor kind of vary in price. You cannot use the voter data to fundraise very frequently. So you have to purchase donor data from a vendor in order to get mobile numbers, which are also a bit of a hot commodity. Most softwares have no upfront cost and they charge per text message. So one that we use frequently at Campaign in a Box is Scale to Win. They lower the cost when you sign up for Campaign Verify. So with that Campaign Verify token, it is 2 cents per outbound SMS segment. A segment is 160 characters. So if you have 161 characters, it's 4 cents to send that text message. And it is 5 cents per outbound MMS message, which includes media and up to 1,600 characters or 10 segments. So with that, you can send a photo or a video and that very long message, and it will only be 5 cents. And that's most frequently what I go with. You can just throw a headshot on there. You can throw a QR code, a photo of you with supporters. Just something to, and I think folks actually enjoy receiving those photos. You can also use them as part of your storytelling tool. You can have a photo related to the subject of your text or have a photo with more information or the donate link. And Scale to Win also gives you free inbound messages and landline filtering, which just means if somebody texts you back, you don't get charged for that. You only get charged for what you send to them. And the landline filtering is just running through the phone numbers and pulling out the ones that are not mobile phone numbers. So to text 10,000 people with valid mobile numbers with an MMS message using Scale to Win, it would only cost $500. And doing our math, you would just need an average give of every single person of 6 cents. So if you send it out with a $5 ask, you could make that back very quickly. So this brings me to my last slide, which is who should be targeted and what is the ask? I would say that younger folks are going to be your target demographic for texting. We are all texting anyways. So getting a political fundraising text, we're already on our phones. And also your small dollar donors. So these are folks who have an average donation of below $250, meaning they tend to give 5, 10, 25 to candidates. They might do it recurring. But they don't usually, they're not going to be targeted for your call time efforts, which is usually going to be folks who donate over $250. You can also text your existing donors to reactivate them with a smaller ask. If somebody's already donated $500 and you text them asking for $10, it's not a big deal. And the asks are typically $5 to $50 depending on your audience. So don't expect any large donations from texting. It can happen. It has happened this cycle. We have seen a few $1,000 donations come through text, which is awesome, but not the norm at all. The folks who are most responsive to texting tend to be younger, smaller dollar donors. You can use it more as a supplementary fundraising tool rather than a standalone strategy. I definitely think that it's, like I said, a powerful tool for reactivating your existing donors, tapping into smaller dollar donors who aren't going to make it into your call time sheet. But don't expect texting to be the thing that make or breaks your campaign. What we usually do is with our texting fundraising, we use it to raise funds for texting voters. We just put everything right over into the other side of it. And of course, be always sure to include a link to donate at the bottom of your text message. If you do register with Campaign Verify, they will let those links through. Otherwise, sometimes carriers will mark messages containing links as spam. It's important to not use a link shortener like bit.ly. Just send your ActBlue link and that will make it past the spam filter 99% of the time. So that is all that I have on text fundraising.
Cool. And then I think it's me with email fundraising. I will be brief because this gets further into messaging and communications, which will be talking quite extensively in further ones. But I wanted to just kind of briefly overview some of the tools that are available for fundraising, and thank you, Nicole, for overviewing peer-to-peer texting. So and being conscious of time, I'll keep email fundraising a bit brief, and we've already touched on it a little bit. But I would say overall, if you are running for local office, just starting out, you are going to have a bit of a DIY approach um, to your campaign emailing. If you do get a good influx of money at the start, running for larger office, I would recommend hiring a digital email staffer or firm, something like that, who just those are professionals that spend their entire time working up strategies to maximize the amount of passive income to the campaign that you're getting from getting from donors. But to talk about it from a DIY perspective, I want to be clear, and this is a misconception that I think some candidates get, is that email fundraising is never going to be the bulk of your fundraising. The bulk of your fundraising is always going to come from dialing for dollars. There's no hard and fast statistic, but you should, if you want to try to put a number on it, probably 10% of what you raise is going to be through the digital sphere. And it's mostly what you're looking for out of your email fundraising is a great way to get small dollar donations, also recurring donations that are important to the campaign. This will be a great way for the campaign to bolster its grassroots bona fides. You see a lot of communications about your average donation being $15-$20. That tends to happen when you have a lot of email donations for small dollar reach out, that type of thing. So some best practices when you are doing this yourself: starting early, initiate your email program kind of as soon as possible. Don't wait to get an influx of signups. Begin by targeting your personal networks and existing donors, just kind of like how Resa and Joe were saying it works the same. And so sorry, my dog is dying to go out and I'm the only one here, so give me 2 seconds.
while he's out, I'm going to tack on to talk about the grassroots bona fides, because when you're talking about a local campaign, when you're talking about a community campaign, those small dollar donors, especially the local ones, are going to speak volumes to the support you have in your community.
Right.
You don't want people to go around accusing you of being like a carpetbagger or being funded by, you know, outsiders. Just throwing that in there.
Well, and the other thing I would say, having been through it, is there are always what I call unicorns. And unfortunately, I mean, it's great if you're the unicorn, but that they don't represent what was just said. You know, the truth is exactly right. 10 to 12% is going to come from your emails. And, you know, somebody's going to be able to point, and we know who they are. People can point out different politicians that were the only ones that did it a different way. And unfortunately, a lot of times folks think they're going to be the next one to be like that person. And, well, I can do it that way because they just did it that way. And the simple fact of the matter is, and this will be for things we talk about in some of the next couple calls. One of the things we always tell potential clients is, and we mean it with love, is not everybody's AOC. Not everybody wins that race the first time when they're taking on the entrenched. In fact, AOC is the unicorn, but it's still the model of how you want to do things overall. It's the same thing. The model's known. It's 10%, 5% in 10, 12% on emails, 5% on event. And it always comes down to, and Joe can correct me if I'm off a little bit, the vast majority is 70, 75, 80% is on the phone making the calls. Unless you're a very rich person who's, you know, Mike Bloomberg, he didn't have to make any phone calls, but that doesn't count. So.
Yes, exactly. Sorry about that. So just to jump back in where I was at, more on the technical side, choosing the right platform. So this means selecting the appropriate CRM for your platform. So, you know, for campaigns starting out, MailChimp is really user friendly, and can be free when you're first building that list. Campaign Deputy is another program that's recommended for small to mid-sized campaigns. NGP Van obviously being the industry standard, but that can get fairly pricey fairly quickly. And so just finding the right platform that works for you, and you can always grow into platforms as the campaign budget grows. And sort of a sidebar to that, we're talking about even deliverability. You want to make sure that the emails that you're sending out are landing. You're putting a lot of work in them. So that means maintaining a good reputation for email providers. So that means sending, you know, when you send out an email, send out a secondary email to the folks that don't open that email. And then after a while, you know, purge anything that bounces back, getting rid of folks who are not opening your emails. That's important because you want to keep your deliverability up, so you don't end up in spam. Frequency of emails, hotly debated topic, obviously, but we tend to encourage, especially at the local level, an engagement of somewhere between 2 and 3 emails a week, and then increase the frequency as you approach significant fundraising deadlines and or election day and or your get out the vote efforts. Not all of these have to be a donor push. They can be announcing exciting updates to the campaign with a donor link, things like that. But now you're sending, what are the best practices, what works. So when you're addressing new audiences, when you're getting people to sign up, if you've gone to a data firm and gotten donor emails, you're gonna want to do what we call an intro series of emails. So it's always your intro piece. It's going to be a little bit of a longer biographical piece about who you are, what you're running on. And then we follow up with 3 to 4 series of emails on the issues that sort of go deeper into what you're running on, the importance of it. you always want to give every email 2 or 3 chances to engage with your email before kind of moving them off of that list. In the same way that, Joe and Risa talked about, just, you know, not giving up on that donor, calling them back, keeping them in an orbit. We kind of follow the same philosophy on emails. And as it was said, same thing with on the phones. You want to keep the content of your email should be compelling, persuasive, especially in the title, as Risa said. Explaining why donors should contribute immediately. We're talking brevity. We're talking making sure that there is a strong case for the immediacy of the donation. I'm not necessarily advocating for this approach, but there's a reason why you get DCCC emails that the sky is falling down every 3 seconds. It's because it's been proven to work to a certain extent. Now that is starting to shift because we've been doing that for 15, 20 years in emails, um, but it's still at the local level, giving folks a call to action is in a sense of urgency is going to get you that donation. So when we're talking about uh, immediacy, we're talking about timelines, deadlines, end of month deadlines, end of quarter deadlines, get out the vote efforts, weekends of action. Um, Also, good email topics for fundraising are about the biggest thing at the local level is tangible results that the donor can see. So an email to raise funds to get yard signs, and hey, we'll send you a yard sign if you donate. Or hey, this a donation of $25 today pays for 100 stickers, or whatever it might be. um Tangible stuff of where they know their money is going to go um is great. And then the last point that I'll make, because I know we're getting late on time here. As Risa said, we/together language. Everything is inclusive. Everything is um along the lines of we're all in this together. And that's just inherent to every sort of fundraising outreach that we do. So that's my little bit on email. I know we're getting towards the top of the hour, and we wanted to get into budgeting. So I think I can just speak very briefly, and then open it up to Risa, Pete, and Nicole. Um, uh, but when we talk about your campaign budget, the thing that I would say is your budget is a living, breathing document that is always going to adapt. Uh, I don't believe there is a right or wrong budget. It's just the budget that you have. And you have to work within work with what you got most effectively. I could speak for Pete, Nicole, and myself that says, we've been on lower tier campaigns that haven't raised a lot of money, and we've beat the big multi-million-dollar competitor, um, because we utilized the resources that we had more effectively than the challenger that was a bit more well financed. In electoral politics, to a certain extent, you can throw money at the problem, and pay for a lot of airtime and pay for a lot of mailers, but you can't. It doesn't solve anything. As previously mentioned, it's Mike Bloomberg's a good example. You can't just jump into the presidential primary and spend $1 bajillion and expect that it's going to happen. There has to be a good a good a good strategy behind where you're putting that money, and why. And I'll just say Risa and I are going to share our budget templates that kind of give you an idea of like, here's generally based on certain fundraising metrics where your resources are going to be spent, whether it's on staff, whether it's on the 30,000 foot stuff like mail, TV, radio, if you're and then kind of on down the line. So that's the what I'll say regarding budget right now.
Yeah. And I think to add on to that, when you're setting your budget goals, think about the things that you want to do first. The biggest, most important things that you want to spend money on. Yes, you want to spend money on compliance. But if you can do nothing else, do you want to spend money on media? Do you want to spend it on a field program to get people out on the doors? So my priorities were I wanted to do 3 mailers. I wanted to do an introduction, an endorsement mailer, and then a get out the vote with all the endorsements and with the issues. Those are my 3 big mailers because mailers are expensive. They're going to be one of the biggest expenditures on your campaign if you're not doing polling or, TV media. And then the other thing that I wanted to spend money on was PDI. I wanted to have voter data. So I had the most up-to-date voter data. So I knew whose doors to knock on. I knew whose doors I was knocking on. And I could be selective about making sure that when I'm at the doors, it's the most impactful doors that I could be knocking at to make sure that I'm going to be turning out the people who are A, likely to vote for me, and B, likely to vote in general. So those were my 2 priority spends. And that was about $12,000 of spending between those 3 things. Those were my priorities. So that determined my minimum fundraising goals. So when you're working on your budget, look at those things. What are your minimum fundraising goals? What are the priority spends for you? And then go from there. What's it going to be like? And so when we talk about fundraising for campaigns, we talk about your Cadillac budget. So that's going to be like if you can do all the bells and whistles. If you're Adam Schiff, what are you doing? You're polling, you're doing TV ads, you're everywhere. If you are doing your midline, right? You're talking about your like your Toyota SUV, right? That's going to be, what are you going to spend more on? And then you're going to do your beater. That's your like 1985 Volvo. It's trusty, it's reliable, it's going to get the job done. It ain't pretty, but you're getting down the road. So what's that going to be? What is your minimum, campaign effort going to be? So excited to share those docs with y'all. Pete, did you have anything? I know we're at that time.
No, that was exactly right. And the great thing is, if you like Roger said, you can still get to the end line in the Volvo. It's a lot easier to get there in the Cadillac. We get that, but you don't give up because you're in the Volvo, because you can still get to the finish line if you do the things well and you use the money efficiently. So that's the one thing I would finish with.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you. My name is Jacqueline Wright, and I am the chair for the Advocate for Social Justice Initiative for the High District Pearls. And I would want to give a round of applause to Resa and Campaign in the Box for this informative, packed session that we've had tonight, this Sunday afternoon. I'm not sure if you guys were wanted to drop your budget inside the chat, the document, so that they're able to grab that and save. Please do save them because I believe they're working documents. um, and then also to get excited for future events, because this is a session that we plan on running through the summer. Our next session will be on March 24th, and it's Campaigning Ground Zero, Branding and Messaging, which is understanding the personal commitment and family buy-in, and understanding your goals and which office would best suit those goals, framing your message, such as like elevator pitch, core issues that basically you would hope to address. So yes, we plan on running these events all the way till June. And then at the end of June, we plan on also hosting like a celebration, headshots. So please do invite more people that have aspirations to run for public office, because the more the merrier. And also, if you guys don't mind coming off of camera for a tad bit so we could take a group photo, because we did make it to the 2 hours successfully. Thank you all. Okay, we got a countdown.
Yes. Okay. I'm going to take the photo for us. All right. 1, 2, and 3. Smile. Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. And I hope you guys all have a wonderful night, and see you at our next session, March 24th.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Thank you. Outstanding.